In this video, we begin our discussion on Chapter 12, in which we go over the characteristics of monopolistic competition, where, looking ahead, currently we are examining different market structures in order to put product demand as well as product supply together to 1. Examine price and output determination, where we have seen that competitive markets lead to a higher amount of output and lower price point in equilibrium compared to that of the monopoly and coordinating oligopoly market structures. 2. Examine profits as well as consumer surplus, where we have seen that competitive markets lead to a high amount of consumer surplus in equilibrium compared to monopolies and the coordinating oligopoly, but have also seen that monopolies as well as coordinating oligopolies lead to a higher amount of economic profit in equilibrium to that of the competitive market structure. And 3. Examine the role for government intervention, where in regards to this chapter, we seek to introduce the monopolistically competitive market structure by considering its characteristics in order to go over the profit maximization process for a firm in this space in order to go over market outcomes. Where in regards to today's discussion, we seek to go over characteristics by introducing some preliminaries in order to define the market structure and go over its characteristics and conclude with some examples, where beginning with the preliminaries, as we saw with prior market structures, in order to study monopolistic competition, we will need two items. The first being the firm problem, maximize profits subject to the production constraint, and the second being our market structure assumption, in which this case is going to be the monopolistically competitive market structure. Where, turning to our two items briefly again, we saw that through the theory of the firm, strictly looking at the firm problem, we can go through a firm's production process as well as their cost structure. And by incorporating the market structure assumption, we saw that we could go through the profit maximization process as we did for the competitive firm, the monopoly, as well as for the individual oligopolist, where without this second item of the market structure assumption, we cannot complete our analysis for the firm, much less for the overall market. So as we did with our prior market structures, we then therefore need to define monopolistic competition in order to examine its characteristics, in order to go through the profit maximization process for a firm in the space, and then go over the equilibrium for the overall market. Where, before we proceed to characteristics, let us first recall our market structures, where first we have our benchmark case in terms of perfect competition, which sits at one extreme in which there's many buyers and sellers, each of which have no market power. We have our other extreme that we've considered, which was the monopoly, in which there's one firm with market power operating in the space. And then we had our first in-between case in the form of oligopolies, in which there was a few firms in the space, each of which whom had considerable market power, and their decision-making process was interdependent of one another. We also have a duopoly, which is a special case of an oligopoly in which there's only two firms in the space as opposed to a few amount of firms. And now we seek to consider monopolistic competition, in which there's many firms operating in the space, each of which with a little amount of market power, which is another in-between case between perfect competition and monopoly, and is a slight deviation in terms of its characteristics from perfect competition. And so we seek to see how those deviations will alter its outcomes in the market. So with that in mind, let us now turn our attention to defining monopolistic competition, where monopolistic competition is going to be defined as a market in which many firms produce similar goods or services, but each maintain some independent control of its price, where the conditions for this market structure to hold are going to be many firms operating in the space whom are profit maximizers selling a differentiated product in which low barriers to entry exist. Some market power is available to these firms. They are independent decision makers, and zero economic profits are expected in the long run. Where, turning our attention to these characteristics a bit more carefully, we see starting with our first assumption or characteristic of many firms. This is going to be a classification assumption and is analogous to what we saw in the perfect competitive case, many firms operating in the space, and this characteristic helps aid in the competitive aspect of this market structure, in that there's an inverse relationship between quantity of firms and market power. So with more firms in the space, this provides less avenue for market power for each firm. Moving on to our second characteristic, profit maximizing firms. This is just importing our behavior of firms into our market structure, in which the objective of firms is to maximize profits, and they'll do so at the rate of the marginal rate of Marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost, and similar to what we did with prior market structures, we also import our behavior on consumers, whom are utility maximizers. Maximizing utility at the rate of the marginal rate of substitution is equal to the price ratio. Moving on to our third characteristic, we have differentiated products, in which goods are substitutable across competitors to a degree, where through product differentiation, brand loyalty can be established. Where product differentiation is going to be features that make one brand appear different from competitors, and brand loyalty is going to be consumer sentiment towards a brand. Where a particular example will be the fast food industry, where a popular commodity is the chicken sandwich. Chick-fil-A, Popeyes, McDonald's, Burger King, and other fast food chains have their own version of the chicken sandwich. They all fulfill the role of being a chicken sandwich, but they all differ in terms of the type of bun that's being used, the quantity of chicken in the sandwich, as well as how it's cooked, as well as the condiments that are being used in the chicken sandwich. Where through these things that are different across each of the brands, this allows for some differences across the chicken sandwich to alter its taste, which will then allow consumers to value one chicken sandwich from a chain more so than the others, allowing for brand loyalty. Where with brand loyalty, consumers will view a product from a brand as less substitutable than others, where overall this will lead to the consequence of an inelastic price as well as cross-price elasticity of demand value. Where if we consider another industry, such as the clothing industry, many firms in the space, such as Old Navy, American Eagle, H&M, Hollister, and the H&M, and the list goes on. If we consider American Eagle and Hollister in this instance, if we have a consumer that is brand loyal to American Eagle, let us see what's going on in terms of if American Eagle changes its prices. If American Eagle raises its price, and this consumer is brand loyal to American Eagle, regardless of that price change, this consumer is still going to purchase from them. So what we have here is a percentage change in the price of American Eagle with a little to no response in terms of the demand of American Eagle clothing from this brand loyal customer. So we have an inelastic response in terms of the price elasticity of demand. On the other hand, considering the cross-price elasticity of demand, with this brand loyal American Eagle consumer, say its competitor Hollister, who also makes clothing as substitute good, decreases the price on their clothing. Since this consumer is brand loyal to American Eagle, they still purchase from American Eagle regardless of this price change from Hollister. So what we have here is a percentage decrease in the price on Hollister occurring, corresponding to a little to no change in the demand for American Eagle clothing. So once again, an inelastic response in terms of the cross-price elasticity of demand in regards to American Eagle clothing. So overall then, product differentiation and brand loyalty will assist in granting market power to firms in this market structure. So then moving on to our fourth characteristic, we have low barriers to entry, where firms can enter and exit the market easily, where should existing firms seek profit in an industry, low barriers will allow new firms to enter, and should existing firms be at the shutdown point, low barriers will also allow for firm exit. This is similar to what we saw with the perfectly competitive market structure when we went through low barriers to entry. So then moving on to our fifth characteristic, we have some market power in which firms in the space can alter the price on their good or service, which, going over market power, once again, that's exactly as it sounds, the ability to alter market price, and we have seen that this is determined by the number of firms in the market, market share of each firm, barriers to entry, as well as the availability of substitute goods, where we have seen thus far that there's many firms operating in the space, so this is not going to aid in granting market power for the monopolistically competitive firm. With many firms operating in the space, we would expect low market share, so this also will not aid in granting market power. We also just saw that there's low barriers to entry in this market structure, therefore this isn't assisting monopolistically competitive firms in terms of granting them market power. All that's left is the availability of substitute goods, but we've seen that in our product differentiation characteristic, these goods are substitutable to a degree, but it's through this product differentiation and brand loyalty that aids in granting that inelastic price as well as cross-price elasticity demand response creating that market power. So market power, as mentioned, is once again going to largely be in part due to characteristic 4 of market power, availability of substitute goods, due to product differentiation to help establish brand loyalty. So then moving on to our 6th characteristic, production and pricing decisions of one firm in the market does not affect other firms in regards to their pricing and production decisions, in which we saw this is contrary to what we saw in the oligopoly market structure, in which we had to consider the tools of game theory when we were going over some pricing strategies. So then in terms of our 7th assumption, we have zero economic profits, where in the long run, a monopolistically competitive firm will generate zero economic profits, but we will see that this will be above minimum average total cost, resulting in overall inefficiency. So then with our definition and characteristics in place, monopolistic competition is a market structure that sits between the extremes of perfect competition as well as monopoly. As such, it is a more common market structure that we observe in the real world alongside oligopolies, where in terms of classification of some examples of monopolistic competition in the real world, looking at our table below, we first have the agricultural market. We have many firms operating in the space that sell an identical product, therefore this will rule out monopolistic competition. In regards to the fast food market, we have many firms operating in the space, low barriers to entry, there's product differentiation, some market power, expected amount of zero economic profit in the long run, and the firms are independent in terms of their pricing decision. So we would expect the fast food market to be a monopolistically competitive firm, as we mentioned with the case of the chicken sandwich with Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, Burger King, and all other fast food chains that offer a similar product. In regards to the clothing market, this was another example in the product differentiation case, in which we mentioned that we would expect monopolistic competition to hold in terms of its assumption, many firms operating in the space, low amounts of market power, product differentiation exists, low barriers to entry, zero economic profits, as well as independent decision making across these firms. Moving on to cell phone providers, there's only a few amount of firms operating in the space, so this will rule out immediately monopolistic competition. In terms of the electricity market, there's only going to be one firm operating in the space with high barriers to entry, so this will rule out monopolistic competition. And in regards to the coffee market, we're going to say yes, in that there's many firms operating in the space in which there's low market power for each of these firms. They're offering a differentiated product in terms of how they serve their coffee and in terms of flavors and etc. They make independent decisions in terms of their pricing strategies, and there's zero economic profits in the long run, such that we would expect it to hold. So then, with our definition, characteristics, and some examples in place, where we seek to proceed on in our next video is to go through the profit maximization process for an individual firm in the monopolistically competitive market structure.